How's it going, everyone? Welcome to the talk. My name is Mark Faga. I was at Wayfair for about 4 years, helping them build out the GraphQL program before moving to Hun Club, where we're helping people supercharge their networks and help them expand their outreach with warm connections, all directly on the graph. Today, I'm joined by Jameson, Connor, Shweta, and Hunter, and we're going to be talking to you about their modernization stories at each of their companies. So to get started, we're actually going to just walk down the line, and let's give a background about who you are, a little bit about your company, and give the folks a little bit of insight into the modernization experience you guys had.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. So I'm Jameson Athanassiou. I've been a developer at Liberty Mutual for about 10 years. We were one of the first teams that I know of at Liberty Mutual to start using GraphQL several years back, and we built a monolith backend for front end for that supporting a bunch of new clients we were rolling out at the time. And so as the developer base and the code base of that grew, it became a lot harder for teams to promote code to prod, to move quickly. So we started exploring Apollo Federation to help break that monolith down, to start spreading out some ownership of the schema to the teams that were already contributing to that. And to just help us move more quickly again. And so we, as part of that federation journey, we have been starting to look for opportunities of reuse across departments, starting to get more people involved. And so our journey has really been about incrementally learning, incrementally building that supergraph, and then trying to maintain our business continuity and our business deliverables along the way.
Yeah, leveraging the monolith, right,
Yeah.
I assume paid massive dividends in terms of being able to continue to move really fast without losing a whole lot of business
Yeah,
value. So I'm
absolutely.
looking forward to diving into that maybe in a little bit. Connor, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I'm Connor Dempsey. I'm one of the architects in Poppulo. It's an employee communications SaaS platform. And our kind of journey started as an innovation week where myself and my team, we put forward an idea to the rest of the company where we said, we want to turn this thing from not just a SaaS service, but a SaaS platform. And that really means making APIs, first-class APIs and integration management available to customers, third parties, whatever. So in order to do that, we said we needed a whole new API. We needed a whole new authentication and authorization stack to make that happen. Because we had a really good API, we thought, but it was really quite dated. It was a HatOS thing with XML, and it was basic auth. So we decided, no, we're gonna investigate, and we had a look around, and we actually chose GraphQL. And our main reason for that was we wanted something that we could design together so that it would be something, it would bring us together in that collaborative way. So we started discussions on like show and tells and trying to get people to, engage with us. And we got all this stuff back where they were basically saying, why would I change from our REST API? It works, and don't, we have all the tooling. We don't need to change that. So, it was kind of interesting, but as soon as we kind of got buy-in from all those people, then we got a merger, and we merged with these two other companies, and it was kind of like we were starting again.
You want to change?
We were trying to sell the whole idea to a whole load of other people. So,
Cool. Lots of different stuff going on there. A lot of different angles to attack with you.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of some of the complexities you dealt, especially with the merger. So I think there's going to be some cool stuff that we can dive into there as well. Shweta.
Hi, I'm Shweta Sharma, and I'm from Intuit. I'm a staff engineer there, and I'm working with QuickBooks Commerce, where we are ingesting data from different omni-channels like Shopify, Amazon, eBay. And Intuit has been using GraphQL for a while now, but our modernization journey started with the GED project. GED is a Global Engineering Days. I'm sure everybody has the hackathon in their offices. And we wanted to move forward faster because we wanted to deliver some new features to our customers, and we also wanted to modernize. And we were able to win the leadership or management confidence by demonstrating the technical and business aspect or benefit of the GraphQL. And I would say our technical leadership really helped us bringing that adoption across the Intuit by convincing the leadership, showing or showcasing the benefit of the GraphQL providers today. And I have been with Intuit for almost 3 years now, and I was a REST developer before I joined Intuit. So there is always resistant to change when we want to adapt something new. And that's when what really helped us on figuring out what are we trying to achieve, what is our goal, and how can we accomplish that goal to provide best for our customers. And that's when the GraphQL, which provides the centralized standardization of APIs, which actually enables the parallelized development process of client APIs, really became our first choice because it was hiding the complexity from the client while enabling or accelerating the development process for us. So I'll end with, for me, the GraphQL supports the modernization, and that's what worked for us.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so many themes in there, from the experimentation and starting with the proof of concept, the management support, which I imagine is very critical to making progress and moving forward, and just being able to tie all that stuff back to business benefits to really sell it to the rest of the organization. So all very cool stuff. Hunter, round us out.
Hello, Mark. Can you hear me down there? I'm Hunter. I work in EV charging. I write software to power smart chargers. I started at Rivian about 4 years ago, and we had a federated architecture from the start. I highly recommend doing it that way if you can. It's much easier to define everything from the beginning. At EVgo, when I joined, we had the concept of federation already been adopted, but we had one subgraph that kind of acted as a catch-all for any loosely defined endpoints that still needed to go to production. So that, and shortly after joining, we had a reorganization. So that kind of provided an opportunity for us to look at the data and the commonalities between that and the schema, but also look at the new organizations and the ownership that management had given us to define what that graph might be. So yeah, there's no one way to go about it, but I would say if you're starting from scratch, definitely take the time to do your homework and design the schema as much as you can, especially if you have the data models like readily available, but don't be afraid to dive in and get started. It's likely that some changes might happen that are out of your control along the way that might affect your perfect design anyways.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things, right, that you guys really embraced was like keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Right, which I think is something that I definitely try to use as a model whenever I'm building anything, right? Start as simple as possible and then iterate, build your expertise, and then the alignment with, again, the business continuity and kind of making sure you've got a good balance there is critical. So thank you. So lots of different stories, lots of parallels across all their stories as well. I think this was the easy part. Let's get into some of the harder stuff. I'll actually ask you guys some questions. Once I'm done asking questions, we're actually going to try to open it up to you guys. So if you've got any questions as we're talking, write them down, and we'll try to get through as many of those in just a little bit. So from a thematic perspective, right, I think there are four, I think, key themes that I'd kind of like to dive into with all of you guys. The first is just acceptance and management support, right? Like that change of mindset and how you guys pushed through that and worked with your company up, down, and across, right, to kind of get folks on board and help them understand the value of what you're actually pushing and trying to deliver. Another big theme here is just learning while doing, right? There's a lot of iteration and figuring things out as you guys started to adopt the graph and what it took to do that, the schema design process. How do you actually get into GraphQL, right? It's a unique technology in the sense that GraphQL spans front end all the way through your back end, right? To really understand how to do GraphQL well, You kind of have to have a good grasp over each one of those dynamics and pull that all together to actually make an organization work together. And so I think there's a lot to learn. And so talking through some of that, I think, will be really critical as well. Knowledge sharing and training really ties into that learn as you go, right? You guys have to learn a bunch of things, but you also need to teach all that stuff to the rest of the organization. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then the business continuity, right? And the incremental progress and how you continue to show value, regardless of whether or not you're starting from scratch, greenfield, or you're building on top of something that you kind of already had in place. So why don't we dive in? We're going to peel back to the acceptance and the management support stuff. Shweta, maybe you could talk a little bit about the modernization proof of concept that you guys started with, the challenges that you guys kind of faced, and how that ultimately turned into selling all of Intuit on GraphQL.
Yeah, sure. So actually, we have been using GraphQL for a while now. We have our own orchestrator, and we also have REST APIs, which we support for our third-party developers or app developers, actually. So the challenge with the modernization is, breaking down the monolith is, getting into the partial state, where which becomes really crucial for business, because you do not know will you be able to finish or not. And then the second challenge becomes for the developers, maintaining that parallel state of modernization, as well as supporting the monolith and contributing to that monolith as well.
Yeah, two things that are really hard: estimation,
Yeah.
and maintaining two things at the same time, right? It's double the work.
It
right?
is.
You
It is a
certainly
double
feel that way
work.
sometimes.
Right. So that POC really helped us define the scope, how we want to take it forward, bringing the clarity on the idea, how this is going to work with our monolith, and how we are going to develop these new microservices. And also getting the team on board. Like I mentioned, I was a REST API developer, so does the new hires. Not everybody is familiar with the GraphQL, and convincing everyone, the tech leadership, is hard. So getting everybody on board, showcasing them what we can do, how we have solved certain challenges, and how this will help us move forward, actually really illustrated to bring the clarity on the technical and business aspect of the approach, actually. And team actually learned in and out to the trainings and by solving the real world problem, which maps to our leadership vision, long-term leadership vision, I would say, of this modernization journey, and decomposing the monolith, where the GraphQL is helping us solving the problem technically. For example, like you mentioned, the GraphQL goes from backend to front end everywhere. The contract first approach of the GraphQL really hide the complexity from the client.
Yep.
I can have a schema, my client, where here it means UX, knows really what adhere to, and the backend can seamlessly work. If you make server-side changes, your client doesn't have to change. And that is what is very important when you're getting into this partial and parallel state, how to minimize the impact for
Across the board.
across the board.
Yeah, totally.
Yes.
Very cool. Connor, I'm curious. So as part of your journey, right, as you guys started venturing into the GraphQL ecosystem, especially with the mergers and everything you guys had going on, I think you guys focus a lot on the DevX experience and the tooling to kind of help sell things, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that whole process and how you push that across the org to kind of gain everyone's support.
Absolutely. I mean, the reason we kind of dove into all the DevX was really because the engineering teams already had a lot of REST APIs, and they had built out like little Swagger gateways that aggregated the endpoint so that they could see a lot of the stuff, but they'd all done it for their own domains. So the teams were broken up into their own domains already from a domain-driven design perspective. And it was all very good, but it was all separate. And they'd all built kind of their own separate thing. And maybe one team might use one very specific thing from another team. And we had then, that was nothing to do with our actual customer-facing API. which was built almost entirely by one guy, a really good engineer who was a friend of mine, and he built it all pretty much, and initially the documentation, and then of course it was taken over by others over time, but they were two separate things, the developer site that our customers would go to and the actual REST endpoints from the service, they were all different, deployed differently, maintained differently, and whereas we wanted something that could actually bring together all of the domains and show them something both internally and externally. So to do that, we thought, well, what can we do? What do we need? We need like linting, because we want to have a style guide. We want to say, oh, this, these operations in the graph, whatever it is, they should have this naming convention, or other things like, oh, I should check validation. I should make sure stuff is in a particular way. It reads a particular way. It matches the experience that we were expecting, which was not really what our current one looked like, because while the front end of our application, this monolithic kind of J2EE app, had progressed over a number of years, the API looked very much the same and had very much a list of all the old kind of entities that you could interact with from like 5 or 6 years ago. So we didn't want that to happen again. So it was really just the reaction of like we were hearing the engineers, we were trying to sell the idea of this new thing. It could have been OData, it could have been some other RESTful thing with filtering on top, but we decided that we really liked the schema thing because it would force us to actually discuss what APIs we were going to expose.
And you get a lot of that standardization for free, especially like in Apollo Studio, you can check a few boxes to get some of those sorts of lints right into place, and it makes it easy.
But we had to build out like all these, we built out like a CLI of our own, the CI/CD integration tests.
Yep.
Like the whole flow, we built out a dev portal built with Gatsby. We parsed the AST to pull out the documentation strings and build the dev portal on the back of it. And it was all like,
a big investment up front, right, to make sure that when folks got onto the platform, they had a good experience. It's actually similar to, if anyone called Leia's talk, right, she talked about the fact that it took about 2 years to really launch the platform fully. And that was because Wayfair, when I was there, was also focused, right, on making sure like the experience was top notch. Because without that, you lose people like immediately.
The bar is already set very high, so you kind of have to
make it as easy as possible. Very cool, awesome. Let's change topics a little bit. Learning while doing, right? Learning on the job, something we're all super familiar with, and we do every day. I know I'm always Googling something out there. But James, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about how you guys leveraged the monolith to kind of jumpstart your efforts and how that incorporated into the additional learnings you guys pulled out.
Yeah, for sure. So we started out, we were working with our partners at Apollo as part of the enterprise onboarding process they offered to us. And so through their assistance, we developed the strategy that you just mentioned, which was to start off with our existing monolith and start federating that way. So taking that monolith, turning it into a subgraph, taking that schema from the monolith, that became our supergraph API. And that made it really easy, really fast for us to get started, right? So all we had to do was basically drop Apollo router in front of that monolith, and boom, we got federation running in production.
And all the things that the router gives you for free.
Right.
And the subscription stuff they just announced, deferred support.
Yeah, bunch of great new possibilities. No or minimal changes to our existing clients and consumers, and then no impact to our business operations on a day-to-day basis.
Did it look like what you wanted it to look like?
It didn't look any different, really, from the start. So that's the thing is we just had the same monolith. All of our clients were basically expecting that monolith and all the features that it provided, and they just went through the router to get to it now, and nothing really changed.
Okay.
So really easy way for us to get started, and it was just up and running in prod, boom. So it was great, and it was great as a dev, so we get to start learning on the job and kind of incrementally there. So we started to get to learn how to run Apollo router, a custom Apollo router,
With the straight pass through without any of the complexity
right.
that you might see as soon as you start to introduce
more subgraphs,
additional services and that sort of stuff.
We get to learn how to use Studio, as you mentioned, so we learn how to do schema changes and deprecations and all that stuff, and start to get familiar with the observability that Studio gives us.
Yeah, you effectively get redundant observability, right? You get almost the same observability from your monolith graph as you should have been getting from your federated layer, right? To kind of reconcile things, to get comfortable with the differences and maybe some additional stuff
and so we get to learn all that kind of from the comfort of our monolith, so to say, like, because nothing really changed, right? Most of the tech stack for us was the same. It was the same service that we're familiar with. So we get to learn kind of that stuff on the side and not have this massive tech stack change in front of us.
Cool.
And then it also allowed us to take the time to strategically build out the vision for that supergraph and what we wanted going forward. Really find our core entities, figure out what we want for subgraphs, start to find reuse opportunities with other teams, and start to bring in the right people for the future of this supergraph, and kind of do it at our own pace, because everything was just running in prod.
And that's what was nice, right? You didn't impact your business at all. They can continue to operate. They can continue to change the monolith graph all day long. And you guys are now starting to learn how to build stuff into Federation, experiments, and kind of play, so that you can actually start to introduce additional functionality.
Right. Yeah. Since everything's running in prod with that tech stack that we want now, we can put on little pieces here and there wherever we want. We can just start building at our own paces.
Nice. Very cool. Awesome. Hunter, for everyone already using GraphQL, right? But they're looking to adopt Federation. How would you get started?
Yeah, so if you're already using GraphQL and you're looking to upgrade to Federation, I think it's probably more than likely that this is like a developer-led initiative. One thing I've seen across like adopting any new type of software is that if you don't have proper buy-in from leadership, it becomes really hard to prioritize that effort. So with that being said, there's definitely benefits to the bottom-up approach. The developers clearly see this as an opportunity to invest in themselves, to improve their personal developer quality of life. And with that, you're gonna have a higher chance of success for this initiative in general. At EVgo, our road to the perfect federated graph is still very much underway. It's kind of taken a backseat to a lot of higher priority items. But I think by instilling an outline at the beginning, we can still very much work towards that in a piecemeal way, by deprecating old endpoints and having a process for rolling out the new ones in the new subgraph, or categorizing our new work a little bit more closely. We can still work towards the higher priority tickets without accumulating more tech debt as we go.
Yeah, you use the word perfect, which is interesting, right? Because a lot of times, like, perfect is the end enough. And I think one of the things that folks can get kind of hung up on is schema design. And so bleeding that line and finding something that's good enough to kind of move forward, right, was, I think, fairly critical to being able to continue to iterate and make progress.
For sure. I think if you're looking to migrate like a REST API completely off of REST to GraphQL, this is something that you might need that buy-in from leadership, because it just becomes too much of an effort to do it by yourself. It can really weigh down on the developers to champion this through.
Yeah, I think a bottom-up approach, right, with no support is kind of like a dead man walking.
That's right.
It's hard to really push through, especially something that spans an organization like the way that Federation can.
Yeah, I also feel that it depends on the size of the company also, and how you want to take it up. If you are doing for one team and one org, then it might be a different approach. But if you want to scale it for the org, for the whole company, then you might have to take a different approach.
I have to wear like a totally different hat now that I'm not at Wayfair and I'm at a tiny startup, right, with 12 people. We make decisions very differently, and so it's been a fun change. But all right, let's keep trucking. Knowledge sharing and training, right, ties very closely to learning on the job. Connor, like, you guys are working through the merger of three companies. How's GraphQL helped you guys with that?
Well, it's let me preface this by saying this is still a work in progress.
Yeah, sure. That's
but yeah, like we're like, so I guess what's really happening is we're trying to align every new subgraph, every new like addition to the schema is aligned with like a business proposition, like a new feature or something. So we have this big kind of unification project that's ongoing. And, so as part of that, we have some kind of server-driven UI stuff happening. But it's really, what it is we have a platform API team that we call Pappy for affectionately. And like we try and, they kind of are the gatekeepers right now. But really what they're trying to do is teach and pass on the knowledge of how to make the changes, make additions to the graphs, so that the other teams can just take back the ownership. So kind of what we do is, I might be architecting a little bit of it, and one of the other architects might be doing it, but the engineering teams themselves will come with the thing, with the new change, and they'll kind of come into a clinic with the team. That
Sure.
A brilliant idea that one of the other guys had, to have a clinic to bring it in, and they'll talk to the guys about the change, and they'll submit like a review, and we'll lots of things like we tried. I'll create a plant UML diagram of the entity relationship of the changes, but there's other great tools out there. GraphQL Voyager that we use to just visualize what is the change that's going to happen, and then kind of enable the teams, the individual product, say feature teams, to actually build out the change. And they can just, if they're stuck, they can just reach out to Pappy and get the answer, but we're not like, the idea is that they're not.
It's kind of like an advisory board that kind of folks can go to.
Yeah, it's
get
not this
feedback on the schema design and
exactly
kind of iterate over that process, make sure everyone understands the contract so that they can all separate and go build independently of one another.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Did you see the Apollo Studio stuff with the preview with the schema design flows?
Yes.
Looks super cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wish you guys had that when I was at Wayfair. It looks like some really cool stuff you guys are doing. Shweta, like the POC team, right, obviously spent a bunch of time learning. How did you take those learnings and then share them across Intuit? How did you, what did that process look like?
So we started with the whole new product actually. So the POC, we had a need of starting something new. So we started a full-fledged product from the ground zero, which helped us build the knowledge also from the ground zero actually. And and then we started developing the subgraphs for these new microservices, which actually helped us develop an architectural pattern for the other teams or the new teams which were coming up and who were about to collaborate with this new product, which is QuickBooks Commerce actually. And then it also enabled us, to work in different time zone with geographically divided teams. We were, I myself from India, then we had a team in Singapore, Australia, US, and communicating with each other and still making sure that we are not breaking the dependent APIs or the component was something which GraphQL really emphasized on by defining the very typed schema, which actually helped us move forward in a faster way because we knew what is expected from others, and we did the pair programming, we did the cross-site collaboration, we did the share outs when we faced some challenges, some problems. And for the Intuit Void journey, so now as we have, today we have ongoing journey in Intuit where we are heading towards a modernization, even in the monolith side. What we have done is we have defined standards, we have defined guidelines for teams to contribute to the supergraph or as a subgraph when they are creating, which they have to follow. That includes the details, even like what will be the naming convention you will follow, what will be the new mutation conventions you will follow. And then we have formed a group, we call it API stewards. These stewards, actually today it is a manual process, most of it, because we are trying to automate it, but these stewards are the gatekeepers who review each and every PR today before it gets merged to the Supergraph.
Yeah, very similar to what Connor was describing. It's
Correct.
kind of a governance program of sorts. I know that can be a dirty word sometimes, but it is what it is, right?
Yeah, I think it is the first step in this journey. Before you automate this whole thing, you have to know what to look for and how to define those standards.
Totally, and I think that the reference app, right, the first subgraph you guys built served as a great place for people to go to look at the patterns and understand them, which sounds like was something that really helped boost productivity.
Correct. So because we have a vision of having an open API contracts which actually enables everyone to in the team, even after 10 years, it allows us to escalate the development without breaking any of the existing component. Otherwise, the modernization journey is going to be short.
Very cool. Awesome. Let's keep going. Business continuity, incremental process, two things that are critical to any business because without those, there is no business, right? So, Hunter, right, longtime GraphQL user, what do you see are the biggest benefits of a new team adopting GraphQL?
Yeah, so it's hard to put my finger on a single greatest benefit that comes with working from GraphQL. I think there's a number of technical advantages that we're all probably very familiar with here. The normalization of data, as it goes from the back end to the front end, the expected, standardization of having a schema, like dependable, authorization, caching, and so on. One of the biggest benefits that I see from working with GraphQL actually isn't really a technical one at all. A common theme in software engineering is the separation of engineers into two main groups, right? The front-end team and the back-end team. And if GraphQL can play a bridge to those two teams, it can be a place for conversations to be had that key decisions can be made that include everybody. And so if you can bring your engineering org together and develop as one team, and then with the tooling from Apollo on top of that, it really takes it to the next level of like what you can get out of the box. API design has become much easier for me and my coworkers. The integration of front-end clients has become faster and more dependable. And with the federation, I think seeing that play out in a large company across multiple teams has made it very clear to me that that is the best way to scale. Just with that boilerplate code in front of you, what you can spin up a subgraph so quickly is just really nice to have. And I think the benefits of abstraction and reusability become very clear, and those are key concepts in software engineering as well.
Yeah, one of the things I love about GraphQL is just it's a forcing function for collaboration that I think folks aren't typically used to, right? And that's actually one of the things you guys leveraged it for across the three companies, was forcing everyone to talk about the contracts, right, Connor? And so like it's been quite a blessing. I think it's funny. I've seen it kind of go two different ways. I'm curious your take actually. Like, some folks are like, oh, I get to be at the table and have this conversation, especially the back-end folks and the front-end folks, just like talking about the actual API contract is not stereotypically what most people experience. I think front-end engineers usually just are given an API, they go consume some data and figure out how to massage it into whatever they need to into the UI, and so this changes that dynamic. So there's the people that are excited about having that seat at the table, and then there's folks that sometimes resist, I think, wanting to be at the table. It's like, I don't care what the front end's doing. Here's my data.
It keeps everybody honest, right? Yeah. There's no breaking of the contract, and right away that data is supposed to be there, but it's missing.
Yeah.
The contract testing was definitely a problem for us before, and putting GraphQL in there helped a lot.
Cool. Jameson, let's get back to the monolith and federating the monolith, right? I mean, so you guys landed on this strategy to kind of stick federation in front of it.
Yep.
Did you guys consider other strategies? Why did you pick that one? Were there any challenges with it?
Yeah, so we definitely considered other strategies. As any good developer would, I first proposed a full-scale ground-up rewrite.
It's the most fun way to do it, right? I mean, who doesn't love a greenfield project?
Right. So, so you think about that. Let's say we go down that path, right? And maybe a year later, we finally come back to full feature parity with what our monolith had.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell for the business side.
It's a lot of waiting.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked a lot about leadership buy-in, right? And how important that is. Our leadership is pushing for a bunch of reuse right now across a lot of different departments. So that makes federation a pretty easy sell for us. But what doesn't sound so great is like, hey, you know this GraphQL technology that we want to write all our services in now, and we love it so much. Well, we actually need to hold up on that while we rewrite the whole damn stack. So
Right.
that makes it so much harder to sell. So for us, it was kind of a non-starter. We said, we worked, like I said earlier, we worked with Apollo to kind of develop that strategy and said, this is possible with the monolith we have. We can really do that as it is.
Your monolith was in pretty good shape then. You guys were relatively happy with the graph that you had.
Obviously, the scheme is not perfect. We've got some tech debt.
No scheme is perfect though. We already covered that, right?
Right. But we felt like our monolith had kind of developed over the years around this kind of core concept, this core entity, which really kind of lends itself to federation. So maybe we got a little lucky in that sense. But we a lot of our fields and a lot of our types, we felt like were really go forward stuff, and we could kind of build around that and incrementally build on top of it, and only have limited things that we need to deprecate and remove in the future. So yeah, it felt like it was in a good spot, and I think we made the right decision at the time.
Yeah, no, totally. It's interesting. I mean, a greenfield project doesn't necessarily mean maybe having to wait the whole time to replace it, right? You can still iterate over something and pick a small part of the application. You have to deal with other complexities.
Yeah.
But I know certainly like the experiences that we had at Wayfair, we had started with the monolith, and then we actually decided to abort that entirely, and we ripped the monolith out because a lot of the best practices we wanted to enforce going forward, we couldn't really do with the monolith kind of in the way, right? And so
yeah, and I've heard that a lot. I think Connor, you mentioned
absolutely.
Too, yeah.
Like we took one of those tools for turning the SQL into the graph, and we were like, I don't even know what that thing means anymore because it's like something from like 10 years ago, and like we can't show that to our customers because if they saw that, they'd be like, what is that?
Yeah.
So we just couldn't do that. We had to go and build our own thing separately, and we started to pull out bits and then try and map those to some new imaginary thing that doesn't really exist, but actually better represents the actual experience, right?
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. So like we called out like these 4 different themes, right, that we've been kind of talking through, but a lot of them have just a ton of overlap across one another. I noticed in Matt's keynote this morning, it actually mapped very nicely to something Matt said in terms of when you're working with GraphQL, right? It requires mindset, it requires a plan, and it requires tooling, all right? All of which you guys just kind of talked about in different ways in terms of what an important role they played in your actual modernization journey. So why don't we've got a little bit of time left. Do we have any questions from the audience? We got one. There's microphones coming around. Just give us a second here.
So what are some of the ways that you measure like success? Because success is kind of hard to, like when you're decoupling a monolith, it's not a one-to-one thing. Like sometimes sometimes it's not like number of requests often. Maybe it's like usage of field, like the observability that we get. I mean, sometimes it's like sheer amount of stuff on the new system, but is that stuff good stuff? And so like, how do you report back to the people who pay the bills that it's working or not?
I can start real quick. So we a couple different things for us. So I mentioned that we started Federation as a way to kind of help our team speed back up because the monolith was slowing us down so much with code deploys and all that. So we're keeping track of our metrics as we start to build subgraphs and move ownership around. Like, are we able to get code to prod faster? So that's one that we've gotten better at. And they're able to show numbers for that, which is great.
Were you like measuring like your pipeline times or
we've got
number of PRs?
Yeah, so we've got life cycle metrics that are automatically generated and stuff. So we can kind of start tracking some of this over time with different repositories, different services.
Cool. Okay.
And then also the reuse aspect of Federation. So like if we can say like we took these 2 services and now there's only one subgraph and it replaced the entire service. That's great. That's cost savings. We can actually tie that back to a dollar value. So
very cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty common question. It's a lot easier to see that success defined on the developer team than the business side, right? We can see that our personal lives have gotten easier. but maybe by showing like a new project where you can take the boilerplate of a subgraph and roll it out so much quicker, that might be something that you could show off. In general, things that like we silo our subgraphs and allow them to be deployed one another, that's going to help us a ton, but you don't see that like on the business side as like a huge advantage. So the best thing I can think of is just like the speed of new products being rolled out might be something that you could show them, but it's a tough one, and if you can answer that, it really helps you drive that migration effort. So
I think
No, go ahead.
Go for it.
I would say defining the scope of your change would really help you move forward faster and track your success metrics. For example, for us, we have a very mature monolith, and we, as I said earlier, we have tried a couple of times to do this modernization. Sometimes we felt we were ahead of the game, now we are late in the game. So the approach, like Hunter said, define the scope, take a new product and take that small one subgraph or two subgraphs to the production, prove to the leadership, show the little bit business impact that yes, this is working out and this is how we improve the dev velocity, release velocity, metrics are like that, observability is like that. And when you cover this, that actually contributes to the business success. And then you have a bigger proof of concept running on production, which brings down that drive across the org and helps you move forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think another kind of an interesting tangent is that I think at a certain point you can actually do things, more difficult things quickly with GraphQL that I think you just couldn't really do with REST. Like in terms of us kind of trying to merge different domains and things like that, even different concepts of users, different concepts of customers and accounts and things like that from 3 different systems and slap them together into some kind of cohesive, homogeneous thing that actually makes sense to the front end. And maybe also at the same time, while doing that, remove technical debt of, say, older BFFs that you had that were REST only and did some magical aggregation that now you don't need anymore. And being able to say, well, okay, the scope of doing that is now like, that's 2-3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever, metric you want, but you've gotten rid of XYZ now. So the next time the engineers go to estimate that work, they now have a whole layer of stuff they don't even have to change anymore because it's not involved in the whole process.
Yeah, lots of different ways, Sam, right, to measure success, like you said, and I think it really just comes down to tuning it to what your business is looking for, right? What they care about, right? Map what your company cares about to your success metrics, right? And hopefully that'll pan out. What other questions do we have? Any other questions? We got one up in front.
What do you have to say for folks who come from small organizations? We have one team, we have one client. Where is the pivot point for how valuable this modernization is, as opposed to some of these, massive organizational success stories that we always hear about? What about,
totally.
Where do you feel the small teams can benefit?
You guys have any thoughts?
I mean, how big is a big team really? Like, I mean, I think there's only like 4 or 5 engineers.
I think I might actually, so I went from Wayfair to a startup. There's 12 of us, 12 engineers, that's it. Right, and we are currently building on the graph. I think there's a few things that Federation delivers kind of for free without you having to do a whole lot of work. If you think about some of the stuff that's built into the router and how plug and play it is, you can get up and running very fast with deferred, with subscriptions, there's so many configurable options in the router. The persistent query support now that just got introduced like you kind of get a lot of things for free that you would have to build otherwise, right? Depending on, and some of this depends obviously on the language you're using to build your subgraph, because they vary in feature support, right, kind of across the map. And so take this with a grain of salt, but I think there's a nice standard you get from just having the federated router there. The Rust router runs so fast that the amount of latency that you're technically paying cost on is actually fairly minimal, I think, for what you get out of it. And so we do not have a federated router yet. It's the next thing we're going to do because we don't have deferred support in our language. We want to be able to leverage that with the suspense patterns, right, to actually build a more dynamic and like exciting customer experience. We want more control over how the page paints and loads and progressively displays content to users. And so I think it really comes down to whether you're ready to take on that feature set, right? So we chose to build our monolith graph first. Then we're going to put federation in front of it and kind of continue to iterate. And when we first start with federation, we'll probably run it in the cloud because we don't want to take on running all the infrastructure. Whereas at Wayfair, right, we ran in a Kubernetes ecosystem, we customized the container, we wrote custom plugins, all that stuff, right? And so you gotta pick your poison and decide how much you want to take on. But I think with some of what's out in the ecosystem now, it makes it really easy to get federation up and running. And if you can actually do that in a way where you're even running on the same host, right, your federated router and your subgraph container, you're paying extremely minimal costs for a bunch of additional features and functionality. All the analytics, the insights, you don't have to configure any of that. It's just there. You just have to turn it on and suck it in. So there's a lot of interesting, I think, takes on why it would still be valuable to do despite the size of your team.
I have one last thing to add. The choice of the modernization should be based on the vision of your product and not on the size of the team. You might have a small team, big organization, small organization, but what your product look like in next 5 years, what is your vision, what you are trying to serve your customer in next 5 years, that should really drive the change in your company.
That's a great way to take us home. Thanks everyone for coming, much appreciated. Thank you very much to the panelists. Great. Enjoy the rest of the conference, guys.